So yesterday we talked about the set up the vxlan tunnel interface on the big IP with a flooding type multipoint. That is, big IP can send an ARP broadcast for OpenShift pod ARP request. And one thing I missed here is also you needed to specify the VNI 0. The key here basically is to specify the vxlan identifier ID 0. So this is for OpenShift. But for Kubernetes, the flooding type is long, so no ARP broadcast. And the VNI ID is 1. So here specifically specify the VNI ID 1. So here a second difference I like to point out. So let's go to the code to see why in Kubernetes the controller will set up ARP for each pod, but not in the OpenShift. So here is the big IP controller code in the main Go file. So in the package importing section, like here we see there's a import the Kubernetes client Go, and here it's importing an OpenShift client API. So if we see anything related to a route client, it is for OpenShift, and those are for Kubernetes API call. So if we go down and so those are the argument you can specify for the controller collector pod. So see those OpenShift route argument. So let's go to the main. So here another function you needed to pay attention. This is setup pod pooling, and as you can see here, it's actually calling a Kubernetes interface. So there is no OpenShift interface API here. So probably this will related to the Kubernetes cluster environment. And so this is just to check if it's in the vxlan mode, which is in the means in cluster mode, and also here is another function you need to pay attention. So if we go into that this process app manager events, you will notice here there's a log debug line, vxlan manager waiting for pass event from app manager. So actually this is the line when I turn on the controller collector debug, I see this log line in my Kubernetes lab, but I don't see this. I don't see this log line in the OpenShift, in customers OpenShift debug log. So this is the clue I find and then found this function, and this process APP manager events function actually gets called in the Kubernetes cluster network environment, but not in OpenShift. So if we go down here, we can see this is there is another function called add ARP for pods. So as you know now, the controller will actually add ARP for the pods. So if we go into this function, add ARP for pods, so as you can see, it's just calling the Kubernetes client API to list the all the pods, and this is to list all the nodes in the Kubernetes, and then for each pod, get the VTAP MAC on the Kubernetes node. So here is to get the pod IP address and the MAC address, and eventually write it to the write it to a config section with vxlan ARP entry. Yeah. So here is how you can tell in Kubernetes cluster environment, the controller will actually get the pod and its ARP from the Kubernetes cluster, but not in OpenShift environment. Go back to our main. Yeah. So notice the process app manager events. So this is setup node pooling, calling the process app manager events. So this is the in the main Go file. This is the main function. So this is for OpenShift. As you can see, it uses route and a route config. Here is the in the main function calling the setup node pooling. Yeah. Anyway, so here is like just a brief code review on why in Kubernetes cluster the controller will set up ARP for each pod. uh, but not for OpenShift part.